Working on the shirt, step number 4. This is prepping the seam of the collar to the shirt. So I have the front and back of the bodices here. They're put together with the front seams here at the shoulder. And I have that stay stitch there in the neckline to help me to adjust the neckline if I need it. And to hold the shape of the neckline as I'm handling it. And then I have the collar sitting over here, getting a roll developed in it with a pin here in the front, so that it's already getting a nice rolled shape before I even set it in there. So now we're going to unpin it. And we see where our notches are for the center back that I always like to fold. There's always a little bit of human error involved with sewing, so we're constantly trying to make things look perfect. This is the under part because we can see the understitch, the under collar. And here's the top collar. We cannot see the understitch. This is the right side of the fabric because I can see the front seam is on the inside. And the shoulder seam, we have ironed that back. I'm going to go ahead and take my collar. And I'm going to line that up with my center back notch there on the neck, which was a single notch. We're going to put a pin and secure that to the neckline. And so this is the right side of the shirt that I'm working with. Here's the wrong side of the collar, down. And so we're looking at right side collar, right side shirt. And up front here we have a little notch. So we're going to take that collar and we're going to line it up with that notch. I'm going to take another pin and I'm going to secure it. And then we can just look and see how those two areas look together. Do they look like they'll be okay, or do we have a little excess? Look, we have a little excess right there. So we can use the stitch that we've put in to pull this in, or we can just use pins. So let's see if that stitch is going to help us. We don't want to have any puckers, but we can certainly pull that in by 1/2 inch. Let's go do that on the other side. Let's pull that in about 1/2 inch. We want to work that fullness up to the shoulder. And if you overwork it, you can work it back down. But then this way, you've got some up towards the shoulder seam, and then you can work some of it back down if you've done too much. Okay. Okay, let's see what the color looks like now. Let's go ahead and find that notch. Put that pin back. And now look at the distances. Looks pretty good. I think we solved our problem. I could also do it in the back if I'd like to. But I think I'm going to do it in the front. Let's go ahead and start pinning the neckline. And the collar. And we see that shoulder seam, and that shoulder seam is going to be laying backwards, the opposite of our facing. There, we've made it to the center back. We'll put a little mark there so we remember. We can see it really easily. Oh, we've got that nicely eased in. We don't want to create any puckers, so we want to look and see the other side. Now, take the other side, find that notch, let's see if it's the same distance. Oh, looks pretty good. Good. Let's go ahead and start easing in with pins. Through the collar to the neckline. Smoothing everything out. Making sure that shoulder seam is going backwards. That looks pretty good. I have a little excess there, so let me ease it back. Make sure I don't have any excess fabric. Put another pin in here. Great. We've got the whole collar pinned into the neckline. Let's check our center front to collar positions. They look the same. We want them to look the same. And it looks like we can start sewing. I'm going to sew on the collar side. And I'm going to sew right on top of the stitch I have. Remove my pin. We're going to go forward. Little teeny back stitch. I'm going to sew right on top of that line or right to the left of it. We have to make sure when we come to the shoulder that it's laying correctly. I just checked it. We're going to continue on. We're working now going into the back neckline. Remove the pins as you go along. Don't sew over any pins. Now we're on the back neckline. And even though it looks like we're sewing a straight line, we're sewing it into a curve. So we have to be aware of this. the shoulder seam, make sure it's folded backwards. Remove that pin. I'm holding it in place. Now I'm going towards the front neckline. Again, sewing right on the 1/4 inch stitch that I have for the collar. Let's do a little back stitch. And that completes step 4A. Setting the collar in. We're going to continue on with 4B, which will be layering the facing on.